You mentioned sadness being sacred, sadness being a human emotion that we all feel when it comes into the realm of taking care of our own needs. Sadness, I imagine that being one of those things. You said sadness was sacred, and this is, I think, such a beautiful reflection and teaching. How can people change their relationship to sadness, and why do you think that sadness is sacred?
Well, I think sadness is something that we often kind of push away or we have an aversion to, and it makes sense because a lot of our brain is still kind of more mammalian or primitive, and negative emotions like fear, sadness, suffering have been a way for us to keep us safe because it's something that we are averse to. Like, it's actually neurologically, like, we're averse to these things, and it makes sense when we look at our evolution and we look at a lot of our brain that isn't fully evolved. So yeah, I think a lot of us push it away, don't want to feel it. It feels uncomfortable, it feels painful. And I think the first way to kind of change your relationship to sadness is being able to expand your nervous system to be able to hold that emotion, to be able to hold fear, to be able to hold pain and suffering. And that can take some work and some healing work to get there, but it's really important to make that space for whatever emotions we're feeling or processing. And as empaths and highly sensitive people, it can be pain that's not necessarily even ours, but I think that we're here to process it, partly not as our responsibility, but I think there's so much wisdom we can learn from processing it. I feel like that's kind of broad, talking about expanding the nervous system, but that's some of the work that I do with my clients. Other things that have been really helpful for me is creating rituals around sadness and actually honoring it as something, as a teacher, as something that has so much wisdom and is here to teach us. And I think it's Jack Kornfield, a teacher that I really love. He talks about, he refers to negative emotions or things as demons, and he talks about having those demons in for tea and talking to them and learning to them and creating friendship with them. And for me, that's been a really interesting way to reestablish my relationship with sadness and some of these other emotions that we typically label as negative. Is how do I let this in for tea? How do I befriend this emotion, and what does this emotion have to teach me? Because there's deep, deep wisdom in our emotionality, and as we lean into our emotionality, we can learn so much.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. I love Jack Kornfield. Another thing that I heard from one of his teachings when he talks about Buddhism is life consists of 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. And all of these things are a necessity in order for us to understand love. There's this conversation that happens, I think, in spiritual circles, which is, at least at the very beginning, is that okay, well, being enlightened means to just be happy all the time, to just let in all the positivity and just sort of demonize maybe all the shadow work. But the one thing that I had learned along my journey is how important and how integral it is to understand your sadness and your pain, because the contrasts in life have to exist for both of these dynamics to exist. So the only reason we feel happiness is because at some point in our life we've felt sadness before. And because we've felt sadness, we have the ability to understand what it means to actually love and enjoy each moment that we're in. And so I think what I'm drawing from what you're saying is that it'll hurt to ease into the sadness if you're looking at your healing from the egoic perspective, but it will be freeing and liberating if you're looking at your sadness from awareness, right? Because you're feeling it just as more of an experience and understanding that in life, there are going to be happy times, there are going to be sad times, and the whole point isn't to identify or over-identify with these moments, but to use them as opportunities to push you forward, opportunities for growth, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's no growth without suffering. And again, I think these concepts keep coming up in our conversation, Eric, of just the duality of the importance of both sides of things and being a human. And I think as we expand our nervous system to be able to hold sadness and to experience it and let it be, we also expand our ability to hold joy and have bliss and have love. The shadow and the light, the more I'm learning, it's they're so equally important. And I know that we very much, the light is more comfortable, right? But the darkness can propel us into more light. And if we leave the darkness unaddressed or even don't honor the darkness, we're really just shutting off half of what it really means to be a human.